I've been struggling with this minigame for ages. Midnight Motorist. There are many different theories about the meaning of this arcade game, but I wasn't really satisfied with any of them. But finally, I came up with a theory that I'm really happy with and that I haven't seen in that form anywhere so far. Hello and welcome to a new video. I'm really excited about this one because for almost 3 years by now I've been trying to make a full timeline on the Five Nights at Freddy's story, and I ran into many difficulties. But this one thing was probably one of the biggest problems in the entire process: Midnight Motorist. This minigame is incredibly hard to solve because we don't really have a clue about who these people are, nor where or when that whole thing takes place. I mean, it's the 6th game and Scott randomly chooses to introduce a new yellow character that has never been seen before. That certainly doesn't help. But anyways, I did come to a conclusion and I really think that my ideas make a lot of sense. But as for any theory, remember, in the end it's still just a theory. That being said, let's start. Oh, and just a little disclaimer, I know that there are some people out there who believe that the bite victim is Michael, but from what information I gathered, literally everything except the survival logbook indicates that he's not. So in this theory, Michael and the bite victim are not the same person. That being said, let's begin. For those of you who don't know, Midnight Motorist is an arcade machine that you can buy in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. Once you bought it, you can play a classic car race game, and if you are really desperate to find lore, you can enter a little gap at the bottom and enjoy a relatively long minigame. If you don't need a summary of the minigame, skip to the time shown on screen right now. You are driving a purple car through a forest during a rainy night. For quite some time you can't leave the road and nothing special happens, until you reach a certain screen. Here, if you manage to find the exact spot, you can get out of the car and find what appears to be a pile of dirt in the middle of the woods. Please remember that, it plays a key role in my theory. A little bit further down the road is a place called JR's, with a small parking lot and a green guy standing in front of the place. When you, a yellow figure, approach the person, it tells you that you should know that you can't be here and that you shouldn't make this more complicated than it has to be. You can then go back to the car and drive on until you reach what appears to be the place where you live. You get out of the car and enter the house. A person with a grey shirt is sitting in front of the TV telling you to leave him alone tonight, because he had a rough day. You completely ignore this advice and walk straight up to the door, banging on it and shouting, "I told you not to close your door," followed by, "This is my house, he can't ignore me like that," and "Open the door." You then decide to find a way from outside and walk out of the house. In the backyard you see that the window to the room you wanted to get into is broken, and then whoever was inside ran off to that place again. He will be sorry when he gets back. Alright, that's what happens. I personally think that we need to answer 4 main questions in order to understand what we are seeing here. Who are the people we see here? Where does this event fit into the timeline? What are these places? And what the hell are those creepy animatronic footprints in the backyard? So let's start with the first question. Who are the people we see here? Starting with the weird yellow man. Surprise surprise, I think that he's William Afton. The reason for this is that he has the exact same purple car that William has in the Take Cake to the Children minigame, and the behavior of the other characters imply that this is him as well. I know that there are many theories around which say that this is actually Henry, but I believe that my theory makes much more sense. You will soon see why. As most theories, I think that the guy sitting in front of the TV is Michael Afton, and that the kid in the locked room is Crying Child, the bite victim from FNaF 4. Evidence for that is Michael's shirt color and the way he's sitting there, watching TV just like he does in Sister Location. The part with Crying Child is a bit more complicated, and that's where the interesting part of this video begins. Do you guys remember this teaser image from Sister Location? A quick refresher, it talks about a restaurant called Circus Baby's Pizza World, which is about to be opened, but due to gas leaks in the building the place never opens and is cancelled before having opened a single time. But the article already implies that the gas leaks are probably only made up to cover up something else. There were many vehicles at night which got filled with loads of stuff, and a little while later the place was for sale. Fast forward to Sister Location, Baby tells us a story about being on stage once and then never again. She talks about a party where a few children were present, and also that she always knew the exact number of them in the room. But there weren't as many children as one would expect in a busy pizza place. The highest number of kids in the room is 5 at one point, which, at least to me, implies that it must have been a private party, especially because, as we just read, Circus Baby's Pizza World was never open to the public. And who is the owner of all the stuff? You guessed it, William Afton. We know that because of Baby's blueprints from Sister Location. She was built by Afton Robotics. That's why I think that the party baby was talking about was a private test party with the Afton kids and probably some friends of them before the place opened to the public. You all know how baby's story ends. A little girl ends up being alone with her in the room and gets killed by her. And we all know that this little kid's name was Elizabeth Afton, Michael and Cryingchild's sister. Obviously, William can't admit that his daughter was killed by one of his creations, because then the public would know about all his suspicious mechanics that he built into these robots and he would never again be able to work in the animatronic business. So what does he do? Cover up everything and pretend that nothing ever happened, make up a story about gas leaks and leave the place as soon as possible. And what does he do with his daughter? Well, since nothing ever happened at all, he can't bury her in a real cemetery, which is why he is forced to bury her somewhere else. Where would be a good spot to bury someone where no one would find the grave? That's right. I think that the pile of dirt that we see in Midnight Motorist is nothing less than Elizabeth Afton's grave. Her soul might be trapped inside Baby, but her body lies deep in the forest where no one would find it. This is the reason why I believe that the person in the room is Cryingchild. He witnessed the death of his sister, that's why he's so traumatized and only stays in his room. He runs off to that place again, that place not being JR's, but rather his sister's grave, which happens, just like JR's, to be located in the direction the kid runs off to. As many people have also pointed out before, this is also the reason why Cryingchild is so scared of the animatronics in FNaF 4 and has nightmares of robots with mouths in their stomach. That's exactly how Elizabeth got killed. Now on to the second question, where does this event fit into the timeline? Obviously I won't explain you my full timeline in this video, that would be way too long, but we can be sure about some things. The event we see here must, obviously, take place after Elizabeth's death and before Cryingchild's death. While it's not clear when Elizabeth died, we know for sure that Cryingchild was bitten to death in 1983. Many people are saying that the events of Midnight Motorist take place before 1973, in the same night William kills Henry's daughter, the puppet. But that doesn't work with my theory, mainly because of the age of Cryingchild and Michael. In the events of FNaF 4, Cryingchild is about 10 years old and Michael is still a teenager. That would mean that Cryingchild was a small baby in 1973, which is obviously not the case here. Additionally, the minigame is called Later That Night in the game files, which is the main reason why people think that it's the night of the puppet murder. That means that something has also happened in the night that Midnight Motorist takes place, and we have already heard about it. What could that be? We already ruled out 1973, so we have to find something else. We know that Fazbear's Family Diner does not exist anymore, but we do know that at least 2 locations of the Fazbear brand exist between 73 and 83, one being the place from the FNaF 3 tapes, where the original murders took place, and the other one being the FNaF 4 location. We know that the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria opened in 1973, because Phone Guy tells us in FNaF 1, which takes place in 1993, that the 4 main animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy, are 20 years old. That fact is pointed out again in the Freddy files, which means that it's still canon. The FNaF 4 restaurant is not that Freddy Fazbear's location, because Phone Guy mentions in the FNaF 3 tapes, which were recorded there, that at a sister location, multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures happened. That incident is clearly referring to Cryingchild's death, which was at said sister location, the FNaF 4 location. I hope you got that, there was a lot of information in a very short span of time. Anyways, back to the point. Midnight Motorist can't take place in 1973 because William's kids would be too young and Elizabeth would still be alive. Later That Night can't refer to the bite of 83 nor the missing children incident, because then Cryingchild would be dead, which he clearly isn't. That leaves us with a problem, because we are really running out of important events that could have happened earlier that night. We have that 10-year span between 73 and 83, but we should be able to narrow it down to about 5 years, because otherwise the kids would be too young, so let's say about 1978 to 1983. The only events that come to my mind that we know about for sure are the closing of Circus Baby's Pizza World and the opening of the FNaF 4 location. I don't think that the earlier that night event is Elizabeth's death, aka the closing of Circus Baby's Pizza World, because William clearly says the Cryingchild ran off to that place again, which means that wasn't the first time he did that. So I think on that point I have to leave it that way, as much as I hate it. I narrowed the time span down, but I can't tell you for sure when exactly this minigame takes place. The later that night thing, however, only appears in the game's files, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's intentional. It could easily be a scrapped thing that isn't supposed to be in the game, because, well, it isn't in the game, only in the files. This is really unsatisfying, and me trying to figure this out delayed this video for weeks, but for now that's how it is. If I figure it out, there will be a short follow-up video. Enough of that now. Let's move on to my third question. What are the places we can see here? Let's go from top to bottom. The first location that the driver comes by is the pile of dirt in the forest. As established earlier, I believe this to be Elizabeth Afton's grave. The next place is the building called JR's with the parking lot in front of it. My guess is that it's either the location where Circus Baby's Pizza World was supposed to be, or the FNaF 4 location, or the first Freddy's restaurant from the FNaF 3 tapes. The green guy telling William to leave indicates that they know each other and that something happened which caused William to be unwanted there. That kind of rules out the former Circus Baby's location for me, because that building was sold and never appears again in the entire series. That leaves us with the FNaF 4 location, if it is even opened yet, and the FNaF 3 tape location, where the first set of murders will take place after Crying Child's death. I believe that the FNaF 4 location hasn't opened yet at this point for two main reasons. In FNaF 4 we can see the house that the Aftons live in. It is really close to the restaurant and very different from the house that appears in Midnight Motorist. Also, it's strongly indicated that William is the one running that place, because A, he lives right next to it, and B, he has this underground facility right below it, which later becomes Circus Baby's Rentals and sets the location. The fact that the Afton family lives in a totally different house in this minigame makes me believe that FNaF 4's restaurant is yet to be opened. That only leaves us with one possibility. JR's is the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria restaurant. You could argue why Scott chose to name it JR's. I think he did it so it wasn't obvious what location this is meant to be. JR's most likely stands for Juniors, which makes sense since this restaurant is the follow-up to Fredbear's Family Diner, which closed after the murder of the puppet. So, who's the green guy and why does he tell William to stay away? From the way he's speaking, it appears that this person has nothing against William personally. He says, "Come on, you know you can't be here. Don't make this more difficult than it has to be." To me, he sounds more like a guy who's been instructed to not let this person in, rather than someone who genuinely doesn't want him in. That's why I assume that this is just a normal employee who happens to work at this place. But what's the reason why William isn't allowed in? Well, I'm pretty sure that the two people who ran Fredbear's Family Diner back in the day, William and Henry, must have had a dispute after Henry's daughter died. I don't believe that Henry thinks that William is the murderer, because they clearly work together again later in the timeline, but they must have had a dispute since William tried to start his very own brand with Afton Robotics and the whole Circus Baby's Pizza World thing. It's not before the FNaF 4 location opens that they work together again. Since they call each other's place sister location, they can't hate each other at that point. I don't think we can really know what their fight was about. Maybe Henry did have a little suspicion about his daughter's death, I don't know. What's important is that the two don't talk to each other, even though it appears that William is seeking the dialogue since he tries to get in. The next place is already the blue house. There's not much to explain here. It's the family home of the Aftons before they move to the house that is seen in FNaF 4. That means that we can move on to the fourth question. What are the animatronic footprints in front of Crying Child's window? I think it's pretty obvious. William doesn't want his son to leave the house on his own. He knows how dangerous his creations are and doesn't want his children to be endangered by his mechanical monsters. That can be seen with Elizabeth, since the location makes it pretty clear that William was desperate to keep his daughter from getting too close to Baby, because he knew how dangerous she was. Basically, all of Elizabeth's lines in the game leave no doubt that this was the case.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? Daddy, you let the other children go see her. Why won't you let me go?
After William failed to protect his daughter from his creations, he was desperate to protect his sons at all costs. Michael was likely already too old to be endangered by the child-killer robots, but Crying Child certainly wasn't. We learn in Sister Location's private room that William was extremely paranoid, so much in fact that he installed security cameras in his son's bedroom and manipulated his already mentally scarred child with a Fredbear plush that wants to keep him away from all Springler suits. That was in the new house from FNaF 4 though. What he did here in Midnight Motorist is much more disturbing in my opinion. He knew the Crying Child was terrified of the animatronics, since he saw his sister die in one, so what William did is putting on a Springlock costume, likely Spring Bonnie or Spring Freddy, and stand outside his son's window to scare him so much that he wouldn't dare to leave the house. But as we can see in the minigame, even that didn't work on that poor mentally scarred child who always runs off to his sister's grave. We can only imagine what William means by "he will be sorry when he gets back," but I can't imagine that it's nothing good. I'm going to summarize the major points again, since this was a long and complicated theory. TLDR, let's go. Midnight Motorist is a minigame from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. It takes place after Elizabeth Afton died inside the baby animatronic sometime between 1973 and 1983. We follow William Afton, who first visits his daughter's grave in the forest, then gets rejected at his friend Henry's restaurant, first Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, which is called JR's in the minigame. He then proceeds to drive home, where he lives with his two sons, Michael and Crying Child, no name given. Michael, watching TV, tells his father to leave Crying Child alone today, since he had a rough day. He's mentally scarred because he saw his sister die and probably suffers from several mental illnesses and is traumatized. William ignores that and goes to see his younger son, only to discover that he ran off into the forest again to visit his sister's grave. William, who tried many things to keep his son inside the house, even going as far as exploiting his kid's immense fear of the animatronics by dressing up as one and staring through his window in hopes of keeping him inside, says that Crying Child will be sorry when he gets back. Alright, that's basically it. If anything is unclear, feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to explain it to you. This was sort of my comeback video after a really long break from YouTube. That is because of school and the lack of motivation. I can't promise that I will upload more often from now on, since my finals are right around the corner, but I'll try to never have such an awfully long break again, at least not without informing you guys about it. If you want to stay informed, I can recommend joining my Discord server. It's the best way to be up to date about what's going on. As you probably already noticed, I'm not doing FNaF news anymore. That's because I personally find them low quality and I'm too slow for real news anyway. From now on I want to stick with videos like this one and occasional live streams from time to time. There will hopefully be one soon. I know that this channel may seem dead often, but I assure that it's not. I'm just a guy who uploads rarely, but hey, that means I won't litter your subscription feed, so feel free to subscribe for a video every 6 months. I'm joking. I'll stop wasting your time now and hope that you enjoyed the video. I worked really hard on it. With that said, have a great day and stay healthy. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.